January, pay attention. Good news will arrive for your family. Dr. Yonggi Cho, I am going to say something that might confuse your mind right now. January is not just a month. January responds to the human voice. Perhaps you entered this month tired, hurt, without strength, thinking, it is just another difficult January. But what if I told you that the problem is not what January does to you, but rather what you never learned to declare over January? Raise your attention. Because today, I do not speak to people, I speak to time. When I say that the first month decides the destiny of the year, I am not using a beautiful metaphor. I am describing a spiritual law that I learned by observing real families, real stories, and real results. January is not neutral. It carries direction. It sets the tone. It creates invisible permissions. And most people enter this month without realizing they are entering a room where decisions are already being written. Perhaps you are listening to me now and thinking, but I am just trying to survive. I do not even have the strength to think about the rest of the year. And that is exactly where the danger begins. Because when you enter January tired, hurt, discouraged, without words, and without expectation, the month does not correct you. It simply records. It assumes that your silence is an agreement. How many times have you already started the year saying, "Let us see what happens," and then finished by saying, "This was another difficult year"? The families that suffer the most are not those that go through crises. Everyone does. They are the ones who enter cycles without spiritual direction. January observes how you enter. It perceives if you enter with fear, with guilt, with shame, with low expectation, or with faith. And it responds accordingly. That is why there are people who say, "Every beginning of the year something bad happens in my house." This is not bad luck. This is an unconfronted pattern. Let me touch on something sensitive now. How many times have you already started January waiting for a bad phone call? A diagnosis? A financial problem involving perhaps $1,000? A family conflict? You may not even have said it out loud, but you thought it. And repeated thought is a silent seed. The Bible says in the book of Psalms chapter 65 verse 11 that God crowns the year with his goodness, but a crown is only placed where there is a head held high. Whoever enters bowed down does not see the crown. I have already seen people enter January with the posture of someone apologizing to life for existing. I have seen parents enter this month with fear of not being able to provide for the house, even when they need $2,000 for basic bills. I have seen mothers entering expecting bad news about children. I have seen young people entering thinking that nothing will change. And almost always, the year followed exactly that script. Not because God wanted it that way, but because no one assumed authority at the beginning. There was a time when I myself entered a January just functioning on autopilot. The work was growing. People saw me as strong, but inside I was heavy. I prayed, but I did not speak to time. I asked for strength, but I did not decree direction. And that year was one of the most exhaustive I lived. It was not a lack of faith, it was a lack of positioning. I realized I was waiting for God to do something he had already given me the authority to declare. Do you perceive how this confronts common logic? People think that humility is silence. But silence before time is not humility, it is omission. The first month does not need your anxiety, but it demands your voice. Because when you do not define the beginning, the rest is pushed by circumstances. Think with me now, with honesty. If January defines the rhythm, what rhythm have you allowed? Rush? Fear? Improvisation? Or clarity? Direction? Alignment? Statistically, most people start the year repeating old habits, old thoughts, and old words. And then they get frustrated because the result is old. The new year does not change those who decide to enter old. January was not created to crush you. It was created to align you. But alignment requires adjustment, and adjustment hurts because it confronts patterns. It is more comfortable to say it is just the way it is than to assume spiritual responsibility over time. But the cost of that comfort is an entire year dragged along. When a family understands this, something changes immediately. Not because the problems vanish, but because the government changes. The month stops commanding the house, and the house starts commanding the month. And when that happens, even the difficulties begin to obey another rhythm. January stops being a threat and becomes a foundation. If you keep only one thing from what I am saying now, keep this. The first month does not ask for perfection. It asks for positioning. It does not matter how you entered. It matters how you decide to remain. January still listens. January still responds. And that which is established in it echoes much further than you imagine. For many years, I observed something that almost no one notices. People talk too much about time, but they almost never speak to time. They comment on the month, complain about the year, analyze the circumstances, but they do not exercise any authority over what they are living. And then they wonder why everything seems out of control. There is a profound difference between describing reality and governing reality. The Bible never says that we should just accept the days as they come. It says that words mold, build, and establish. When I state that it is possible to speak to time, this is not spiritual poetry. It is a principle. God speaks to days, to seasons, to mornings. And when He creates man, He transfers this type of responsibility. The problem is that most people were taught to ask, but not to declare, to beg, but not to decree. And this generates a weak faith, dependent on the mood of circumstances. Perhaps you are thinking now, but I do not feel strong enough to speak like that. And here is a common mistake. Spiritual authority does not come from emotion, it comes from position. You do not speak to time because you are confident. You speak so that confidence returns. How many times have you already woken up discouraged and let that discouragement lead the rest of the day until 18 hours in the evening? This happens to almost everyone. The difference lies in who accepts this state as the final truth and who confronts it with aligned words. I have seen people declare defeat without realizing it. They say things like, "This month is going to be heavy. January is always difficult. In my family, nothing goes right at the beginning of the year." They call this realism, but in practice, it is negative programming. Studies in neuroscience show that the brain responds to repeated words by creating automatic expectations. Faith has understood this for a much longer time. What you repeat begins to lead you. There was a period when I accompanied someone very close who lived expecting bad news. Whenever the phone rang, the heart accelerated. Whenever a message arrived, fear came. And do you know what marked me the most? It was not the problem itself, but the language. Everything was, if it goes wrong, when it goes wrong, I am already prepared for the worst. That person was not protected. They were trained to suffer ahead of time. When we changed the way of speaking, the emotional environment changed first, and then the circumstances began to respond in another way. Speaking to time is not denying reality. It is deciding who governs. It is looking at an unstable month and saying, "You do not decide the mood of my house." It is looking at an uncertain scenario and affirming, "This will not have the final word." Most people live reacting. Few live decreeing. And those who only react always arrive emotionally late to events. There is something powerful when you wake up and, before checking news, messages, or problems, you define the day with words. Not magic words, but conscious words. Science calls this intentional affirmation. Faith calls it spiritual alignment. Both agree on one point. Whoever directs the mind right at the start has more emotional control, more clarity, and less anxiety throughout the day. I learned that when you do not speak to time, someone or something will speak for you. Fear speaks. Pressure speaks. Family history speaks. Past experiences speak. And when these voices dominate, the month transforms into a weight. Not because it is heavy, but because it was handed over to the wrong command. Perhaps you grew up hearing phrases like, "This is not for us." In our family, it has always been like this. There is no use in creating expectations. These phrases seem harmless, but they teach you to be silent before time. And time does not respect silence. It interprets silence as permission. When you begin to speak with authority, something changes inside before it changes outside. Anxiety decreases. The feeling of helplessness weakens. You may even continue to face challenges, but you no longer feel like a hostage to them. This is not an illusion. Research shows that people who verbalize active hope deal better with crises, make more balanced decisions, and recover faster emotionally. Speaking to time is assuming spiritual and emotional responsibility for your life. It is stopping the outsourcing of the future to chance. It is understanding that words are not just sound, they are direction. And when the direction changes, the path inevitably begins to adjust. There is something that almost no one notices because we were trained to see time only as a calendar. Dates, numbers, days passing. But what I learned, over years of observing spiritual and human patterns, is that January is not just a sequence of days. January is a gate, and every gate requires a posture. No one crosses an important gate distracted without suffering consequences. When you understand this, a lot begins to make sense. Why do certain decisions made right at the beginning of the year echo for months? Why do apparently simple encounters in January change entire stories? Why do mistakes made in this period seem to cost more? It is not a coincidence. Gates define access. They allow or block. And the problem is that most people cross January like someone crossing just any street, looking at the ground, without awareness of where they are stepping. Perhaps you are listening to me now and thinking, but I do not feel anything special in January. And I understand. Spiritual gates do not scream. They do not make noise. They do not announce themselves. They operate in the invisible, just like emotional decisions that seem small but change entire life routes. Studies in human behavior show that the first cycles of a period directly influence the consistency of the following actions. Faith has always known this. The beginning carries a seed. I have seen people enter January carrying frustrations from the previous year, as if they were bringing old boxes into a new house. Hurts, guilt, unresolved words, broken promises. They say, I will resolve this later. But they cross the gate already overburdened. And that which was not treated at the beginning starts to charge emotional interest throughout the year. There was a specific January when I perceived this very clearly. There was an old expectation, a promise that seemed forgotten. Nothing indicated change. Humanly, everything said, this stayed in the past. But something inside me understood that that month was not common. I had no external signs, only internal conviction. And it was precisely there that an unexpected answer emerged, not as an explosion, but as a reopening of something I thought was closed. That taught me that gates do not only lead forward. Sometimes they rescue what was left behind. How many things in your life have you already considered lost? How many times have you said, the time has passed? The problem is that when you cross January believing that certain doors can no longer open, you yourself decide what will stay outside. Gates respect internal decisions more than external circumstances. There is also a silent fear that many people carry in this period. Fear of repeating mistakes. Fear of living the same pains. Fear that January brings something bad, because in the past it did. This fear is not irrational, it is learned. But when it is not confronted, it transforms into a guide. The person does not live the month, they protect themselves from it. And living on the defensive before a gate never generates progress. Research on emotional well-being shows that people who enter new cycles with a threat mentality activate more stress, make worse decisions, and interpret neutral events as negative. Faith calls this guarding the door of the mind. If you cross January waiting for an attack, you will see an attack even where none exists. January was not created to be an emotional weight. It is a strategic access. The problem was never the month, but the way people enter it. Some enter as victims of the past. Others enter as passive observers. Few enter as conscious participants. And it is these who reap different results. When you understand that January is a gate, you start to pay attention to what you take with you, to the words you carry, to the expectations you feed, to the decisions you postpone. Because all of this crosses together. And what crosses the gate does not stay still, it multiplies along the way. It is no exaggeration to say that many years are defined in the first steps, not by mysticism, but by alignment. Those who cross January with clarity, even facing challenges, walk differently. Those who cross confused, even with opportunities, get lost easily. The gate does not decide for you. It only amplifies what you are already carrying. And when you understand this, something changes silently. You start to treat January with respect, not with fear, not with anxiety, but with awareness. Because those who understand the value of a gate do not run while crossing it. They cross with intention. Now I want to bring this to the most practical place possible, because understanding without application only excites, it does not transform. Everything I set up to here loses strength if it does not go down to daily life, to the real routine you live, with bills, family, pressures, news, and responsibilities. The biggest mistake people make is thinking that spiritual change happens only in intense moments, when in fact it consolidates in simple and consistent practices. Most people wake up and the first thing they do is hand their minds over to chaos. Bad news, messages that generate anxiety, automatic thoughts of worry. And when they realize it, The day has already started heavy. It was not what happened that defined this. It was the absence of direction at the start. Studies on behavior show that the first minutes of the morning have a direct impact on the level of stress and productivity for the rest of the day. Faith has always worked with this same principle, only in a spiritual way. Therefore, there is a simple exercise that seems small but is profoundly transformative. During a short period, you decide to interrupt the automatic pattern. Before reacting to the day, you define it. Before listening to the world, you establish what governs your house. This does not require hours. It does not require emotional strength. It does not require feeling something special. It requires decision. I have already seen people completely change the environment of their own home just by changing what they said early on. It was not because the problems vanished, but because fear stopped leading. A mother who woke up every day anxious about the future of her children began to declare protection and direction. A father who lived suffocated by financial worry started to affirm provision before looking at numbers. None of this eliminated responsibilities, but it brought clarity. And clarity changes decisions. Decisions change trajectories. I want to propose something very specific to you, because vague challenges do not generate results. For 7 days, just 7, before anything else in the morning, you are going to declare good news over your family. Not about the whole world, not about everything you do not yet control, about your house, about what affects you directly. You are going to choose simple, conscious, repeated words, not as one who begs, but as one who aligns. Perhaps your mind will question, but what if nothing changes? This question is common. It is born from the tiredness of someone who has already tried many things. But perceive, the challenge is not to change the world in 7 days. It is to change the internal government. Research shows that practices repeated for a few days already begin to alter emotional patterns and reduce levels of anxiety. Faith calls this preparing the soil. No harvest begins on the day of the harvest. During these days, you will notice something interesting. The environment begins to become less reactive. Conversations change tone. You respond differently, not because you became another person, but because you stopped operating on autopilot. And when the autopilot changes, the result begins to follow. Many people say they want a different year, but they continue repeating exactly the same words, the same thoughts, and the same emotional habits. That is asking for change while maintaining the same command. When you accept the challenge of aligning words for a short period, you are testing an old principle with a modern mind. And the results, even subtle at the beginning, are real. If at any point during these days you forget, do not blame yourself. Guilt breaks constancy. Just resume. The objective is not perfection, it is continuity. And continuity, over time, creates emotional, spiritual, and mental stability. The most important thing of all is this. When you assume this type of practice, you stop being a hostage to time and become an active participant in your own story. Not because you control everything, but because you chose not to be led by fear. And that decision, by itself, already changes more things than you imagine. Before you leave here, I want this to be recorded in you in a simple and clear way. Time is not your enemy. It is responsive. January did not come to test you, punish you, or repeat old pains. It came to respond to the level of awareness, positioning, and direction that you assume. When you understand this, everything changes. You stop reacting to the days and start leading them. And this change, although it seems subtle, is one of the most powerful anyone can make. Nothing that was said here is to generate pressure, fear, or empty expectation. It is to generate clarity. Clarity that small decisions made now mold much larger results further down the road. Those who learn to govern the beginning do not get lost in the middle. Those who assume responsibility over time no longer live as a hostage to it. And this understanding, when it truly descends into the heart, raises any person to a level above what they were before. If this made sense to you, do not let this movement stop here. The next video that appears now continues this process and deepens this awareness even further. It is one more step, one more adjustment, one more degree of understanding that makes you, in a practical way, 1% better than you are at this moment. Thank you for staying here, for opening space for this learning. I wait for you in the next video. Would you like me to create a specific list of these daily declarations for your 7-day challenge?